we did it. So, welcome back to another episode here on the Matt Nostalgia Show. We are recording on Thanksgiving Day, right? And so, first and foremost, happy Thanksgiving. So happy that you guys are here. Hopefully, potentially, depending on your situation, hopefully you're not watching this on Thanksgiving. If you have better things to do, if you are out celebrating the holidays with family, hopefully that this is a great tomorrow exercise. but I know that there's a lot of stigma around traveling and the decisions that everyone's making during these holidays, and I just want to say that whatever you decide to do, just be safe, and I hope that you're enjoying this to the best extent possible. If you hear any noises coming from around, that's Thanksgiving happening upstairs, and that's probably the number one thing that I'm grateful for, is the amount of support and love that I get from my family and my wife, who allowed me to break away from assisting in all the cooking and preparing to record a little something for you guys. And I'm really excited about it. I love Thanksgiving. It's probably one of my most favorite holidays of the year, just because of the meaning behind it. And it's because one of the foundational aspects of any resilience training that we discuss, or any tools and all of that, one of the biggest and most important building blocks is gratitude. And so the fact that we actually have a national holiday here in the US that is centered around gratitude is pretty amazing. And now you can go back in history and try to pick apart the good parts and try to overwhelm them with negative aspects of history, and how early colonists came in and ruined lives for Native Americans, and that's absolutely an option, in a fairly valid, logical approach to historical analysis. However, it's not really beneficial for you today, right now, to try to go back and manually extract the negative from something that's there, because you can do that with anything. You can do that with any great thing that's ever happened. There's nothing, very rarely, let's say, has something great occurred and everything surrounding it was just good and positive, and there were no negative unintended consequences or lack of considerations that ended up harming or hurting somebody. It was actually really cool, though, because this morning I was up and I was actually doing some schoolwork, and eventually Yasmin got up and she came down, and her daughter came down, and we were talking about it, and we were kind of doing just a quick morning rendition of what typically happens at dinner, where we were all kind of stating what we were grateful for. And it was really, Yasmin was asking Adi, she was like, what is it that you're grateful? It's Thanksgiving. What are you grateful for? And Adi was answering, and she said turkey and food, and then eventually worked its way to family, right? It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool way that she got herself there, right? And it's kind of something that I teach in my gratitude training, is how to get to there. And it's not specifically how to get to family, but it's kind of like the how and the why and the building blocks to the thing that you're grateful for. Because in the pursuit of that foundational point of appreciation, we spend the time analyzing, like letting our brain ruminate, or just like marinate in grateful thoughts and marinate in grateful processes. Like, if I'm grateful for turkey, right? So I have to think about, well, how did this turkey get here? And it's actually funny that she said turkey, because we're not having turkey. We're having Cornish hens, because there's just the three of us here in this house today. So we're like, we probably don't need a big turkey. There's nobody. We're not feeding a fleet. So we decided to go with Cornish hens. But she had said turkey, because stereotypical Thanksgiving, go get some, gotta love it. But she said turkey and food but in order to get to family, she had to sit there and contemplate What is, like, how did the food get here, and how am I able to eat it, and how, like, well, that requires preparation. That requires us going to the store. Oh, well, mom and dad have to go buy it, and then they have to bring it here, and then they have to know how to cook or look up recipes, and then make sure they have all the ingredients, and then do the work. And it's cool because she's really involved. She really enjoys the cooking aspect of things, and so she's directly involved. She knows the amount of work that it takes, and so working her way from there to family was like her chance to let her mind marinate, stick with like the cooking analogies and what have you here today since it's Thanksgiving, and ruminate around those processes and what it takes to get there. And so during that time, like, your mind is just, it's working now from a space of gratitude. It's working from a space of positive thoughts and emotions that are evoking or promoting the production of those feel-good chemicals like serotonin, like dopamine, that we naturally produce when we get there. And that's what makes us feel good. And that's why it's so important to have these moments of gratitude, because you're able to manually go in and make this happen without any sort of chemical like trigger to turn it on. You're not taking a pill, you're having a thought. You can change your chemistry by having a thought. And so she was able to do that, like, and I watched it happen this morning. It was really cool. And so that was what spurred me. Something happened after this where I was like, let's look up the history of Thanksgiving real quick. And I was like, I guarantee there's a million YouTube videos. Let's just try to find one that's like short, quick, and entertaining. So I looked one up, and it was like a 3.5 minute U.S. history video, I think. And it was really cool because they actually they talked on like the 1620 Thanksgiving, and how the half of the population of the colonists had died during the first year that they were there. Time frames might be wrong, but half the colonists died, and they ended up relying really heavily on the Native American tribe that was close to them, and there was really good relationship between them, that specific tribe and that specific group of people. And the Native Americans supported them, and they brought food, and it turned into a really good feast. But it was cool because they talked about like the food that they probably actually had, which wasn't turkey. It's like goose and lobster and cod and stuff like that, stuff that was actually like there around them, which was less likely to be turkeys actually. So all of that aside, the one aspect that I wanted to pull from there that was really interesting is actually there was a woman that decided that Thanksgiving was so important that she wanted to have it acknowledged as a federal holiday. And the thing, like, Thanksgiving, that dinner in 1620 kind of exists, that happened, and there was, it kind of turned into a religiously based, because I mean that was pretty much how everything was based then. That's the reason that people were coming here, was religious persecution and freedom and opportunities and the chance to become like the entrepreneurial spirit of going and finding new land and exploring and putting your name on it and finding gold and golden cities. That was a huge driver. But it was really cool because they talked about that, how it was a very religiously based holiday around fasting and giving thanks for kind of overcoming droughts and famines and things like that, and people coming together to feast and enjoy themselves during that time. But it was very disparate. Like, different colonies celebrated in different ways, or different times of the year, different weeks, even months apart. And eventually it kind of stemmed. There was a kind of a national proclamation right after, in 1777, when the colonists defeated the British, and they said, okay, we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving. And that's when, all colonies were doing it their own way. But it was cool because later, it took all the way until Abraham Lincoln was president, and there was a lady, and I don't remember her name, but you got to think back to these times, like, a woman has not that great of standing in the public domain, and they're wielding a lot of power kind of behind the scenes and in the men's lives that we know, like Lincoln, but the actual, like, their prominence is not very, is not allowed to be high because they're not equal citizens. But this woman made huge change. Like, she kept writing and basically created like a petition to the point where Abraham Lincoln eventually was like, yeah, no, we should make this a national holiday that is celebrated on the last Thursday of November every year, and that is going to be the holiday. And there's no more. And so then the idea was to promote kind of a national coming together, a national giving of thanks, all celebrated at once. This was just really cool that even in a time like that, when somebody really felt passionately about something, even somebody that didn't have all of the tools and eligibilities and had all these obstacles in their way, she was able to make a change that still lasts to today. It's really powerful. It's really, really cool. I did not know that until today. So yeah, that was just kind of a fun, interesting way to start out your Thanksgiving. A little bit of history note and a little bit of overcoming obstacles and how people have not let themselves be deterred when they're motivated by something, and when something is intrinsically valuable to them, they fight through to the point where they succeed. And I thought that was great. And so that was kind of I thought that was a really cool way of like an origin story for Thanksgiving and how we got to be where we are now. Now, the interesting thing is where we are now, right? So when people think about Thanksgiving, it's very common that people will think about it in a way that's like, oh, I'm going to go, like, family's going to come together and we're going to sit at the table and it's going to get real dicey because people, Uncle John's going to come in with his really strong opinions and he's a loudmouth and he likes to overtalk and overshadow everyone else that's around, and I hate his opinions, and Aunt Sue, she's always gets riled up by him, and they always get into this fight, and it turns into this really heated battle where families fighting each other. This year especially, with all the stuff that's happening between COVID and the restrictions and people making choices to go out or not, and then people, the election just happening, and all of this highly contentious stimuli that's out there that is, creating kind of like a tinderbox for your Thanksgiving table if you decide to participate. And the point of what I'm getting at and the direction we're going to go in the show today is actually not really specifically built for Thanksgiving dinners or holiday and family get-togethers. It fits perfectly for it, but it is a multi-use tool that can be used there and other places whenever there's a point of contention, but specifically dealing with you. So there's an interesting passage. Actually, I just want to read it. It's from Epictetus, and I don't know if that's how you say his name. That's just how I'm going to say it. We call him Epi in this house. So Epi said, quote, "Keep in mind that it isn't the one who has it in for you that takes a swipe that harms you, but rather the harm comes from your own belief about the abuse. So when someone arouses your anger, know that it's really your own opinion fueling it. Instead, make it your first response not to be carried away by such impressions, for with time and distance, self-mastery is more easily achieved." Okay, so thank you, Epi. We always appreciate your input here. This is a very, the resilience that we discuss is very Stoic-minded, but it's not, I don't feel like Stoicism really does the complete job, because it's like most other aspects of philosophy or approaches to betterment, right? So whether it be political and economic, you could talk about capitalism versus socialism versus communism. You could talk about, this, you should have this kind of mentality or that kind of mentality, but it's, like you should be stoic, or you should, not. You should aggressively pursue your emotions, the opposite of stoicism, whatever that would be. Normal life. But the thing that any philosophy that claims to have kind of like the cure, or like this is the way to a righteous life, the way that they all fail, no matter what it is, uniformly across the board, is that they fail to acknowledge our being human, right? Like it's like, if you could just not be human and do these things that a not human would do, then you're gonna be awesome. Everything's gonna be better, and it's just gonna be great. So just do all that stuff that you would do if you weren't you, and then your life will be better. Now, and it's not to say that you shouldn't strive in pursuit of it. That's kind of like the idea behind Jesus and God and the Judeo-Christian kind of realm of things. It's like, yes, you should always walk in the direction and in the path of Jesus or in God and all of that, but and acknowledge that you're never going to be them, but you should walk in the path. Right? So you're going to veer off the path, acknowledge that you veered off the path, get back on the path, right? And just if, as long as you keep doing that, you're going to live a better life. And that's true. And that's true for all of these. It's just, but when they lay out the specifics, like this is what you need to do, it's so many times it's just like, okay, we could do that, but we're human. And so the political and economic example is that I'll break down really quickly, because I don't want this to be a political episode, but if you look at capitalism and socialism would work stupendously well if we weren't human. And I mean that because humans inherently want to work, not want to work. They want to achieve something great. They're greedy kind of naturally. Like, we want stuff that's good for us. And if there's more stuff out there that we can get, then we want more stuff out there that we can get. And so socialism says, well, if you just don't want that, then this is going to work great. If you just work, and then the fruits of your labor get dispersed out to everybody, and everyone has what they need, and you work as hard as you can, and so that you have what you need and everyone else has what they need, then everyone's going to be okay. And that would be true, but it's not practical. It's not realistic, because we don't operate that way as humans. To assume that we can operate that way in any sort of large-scale capacity is to be naive about the way that our minds actually work as humans. We will look at people that we don't feel are working as hard as they can, and we will judge them, and that will create animosity inside of the group. Or it will spur us about, oh, well, maybe I don't have to work that hard either, because he's not working that hard, and I know he's not actually hurt, so I can take a load off and not work as hard. It takes away incentives to work hard. Now, capitalism is really cool because it actually leverages greed towards the benefit of all. You benefit and you strive, and you can do better and better and better by creating things that benefit other people. Now, the cons with that is that we will do that to the detriment in a short-term method that creates a lot of unintended consequences. Pollution and toxic waste, whatever, all of the negative fallout of industry, unregulated industry is not good, right? It's going to happen without any sort of like safety rails on it. And you could say, I heard the argument like, oh, well, it's in the business's best interest to not pollute the water, because then it's going to hinder people or hurt people downstream from them, and then they're going to be looked at negatively, and then people aren't going to go to that business anymore. Like, that's honestly, it's just not true. It's the harm can be so localized, and their product can be so beneficial that they don't really care, and they can just pay off and the people that get hurt. Not to get too far into the weeds on that, but it's the reason why pure capitalism doesn't work. Pure free market, unadulterated capitalism won't work, and it's why socialism won't work. And so what all of that is the predicate to, what we're talking about in the quote that I just read you from Epictetus, where he's basically saying, don't get wrapped up in what people are saying. Like what we do is we get wrapped up in what people are saying, but we don't always, right? It's not consistent, and that lack of consistency in our response to what is said is an indicator that what is said is not that important. Let me make it more simple. So if you're like around my age, or you're an adult or older, and a young kid, early teens, is like, "Hey, old man, like, look, like, why you dress so weird? Whatever. Make some sort of like nice hair, bro." You're like, okay, like, you're a dumb kid, like, and that's adorable. I appreciate your naivete about life, and carry on your way. But if somebody that you worked with, like your boss, came in and was like, "Hey, nice haircut, man, looking real good," said the same thing, you're like, oh, like, you might take that different, or your wife or your spouse says it. It's all the same words, right? The same exact words are being expressed, but by different people, and it's not actually the words that are creating the impact on you. It's your emotional engagement with the words tied with the person that it's from. And so what they're saying to do is to detach that, and you should basically look at all of the words as if you would be looking at it from that of the teenager. To be like, okay, don't really care. It's not that I don't care about you. It's that doesn't really impact me. And so moving on to the next thing, because I'm not going to let myself become emotionally tied to this irrelevant and less than important comment or statement that you've made. And I think that it's a good lesson. Again, this goes back to the path that you can choose to kind of go back to and to walk on. And so if you want to choose to go on that path, like right now is a particularly good time. And the reason that I say that this tool is good for Thanksgiving and for the family get-togethers and the holidays is because of those fiery conversations that are going to happen at the table, right? And somebody's going to say something political, and it's going to rile you up, let's say. And you having an alternate or opposing opinion than that, and being researched into it, being being aware of additional things, you're going to start having an emotional response to these things, and that's when the conversation starts to get heated. It doesn't get heated because people have differing opinions. It gets heated because we are emotionally attached to the difference of opinions, to ours, and we feel a negative emotion attached to what they're saying. And so it's all highly fraught with this emotional turmoil that what Epictetus is saying isn't necessary. Because if it was somebody that you essentially if it was somebody saying that you didn't respect or you didn't care about, then you really wouldn't mind. It wouldn't bother you. But it's coming from family, and it's being spoken out to other people, and you're concerned that this idea itself is just so painful to your very existence that you must speak up. And so what I think the failure in this philosophy is that it's saying don't, just pull back. What is it? So this is from the Daily Stoic, and so at the end of the quote, the authors, Ryan Holiday, I think, is one of them, will give you their kind of insights and their thoughts on it. The very last, so I'm going to hit the last paragraph. But what if we retain control of ourselves? We decide whether to label something good or bad. In fact, if that same event happened to us at different points in our lifetime, we might have very different reactions, which is an interesting point. It's very true. So why not choose now to not apply these labels? So the labels being good and bad, why not choose to not apply those at all? Why not choose not to react? So that's the Stoic path. this thing gets said at the table this evening, you feel the rise of the emotions inside of you, and you know that you feel true to your core that whatever is being said is not right and not good. And so your emotions attaching importance to the statements that are being made, they're saying detach those, cut them free, and choose, acknowledge, be aware that it's coming up, and then detach and cut off. And that's great. It's a good philosophy. It will keep you from getting into unnecessary stress, high stress or stress inducing situations that, like, it doesn't really, at the end of dinner, like, what difference is it going to make? Like, you're just going to be more stressed. You will have added stress into your life. You're going to build up that cortisol. It's going to have negative impacts for a very long time lasting after that dinner, that it's just not necessary if you just detach that yourself from it emotionally. Now, again, that's the path. But how do you walk that path? We're human. Like, that's not the way that we are, and that's not the way that I like to engage with philosophy. When it comes, I like to break philosophy into usable pieces of information that are applicable to your life, and not just like, oh, that sounds great, grand, and glorious. Let's do things that realistically we're not going to do as human. So this is actually what I kind of approach to this, which is a little bit different than what they're saying to do, where you just do not react. I don't think that's, if you're emotionally tied to a topic, like if you're very vested in politics and they're talking about the election at dinner, it's going to be very difficult for you to just say, okay, whatever. You know, I've heard people say that they take the strategy of like, yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. But honestly, and the point of that being that, like, you're not going to engage in this negative feedback. You're not going to feed it. You're not going to feed or fuel this fire with your thoughts and give them a board to bounce off of, and then you guys create this game where you're slinging shots back and forth. And so, but the thing is that's antagonistic. So you are creating a stressful situation, and you're going to make that person upset too. And so, and if that's your goal, then that's your goal, and you can easily accomplish it by doing it that way. What I have found myself in the best versions of me in this exact situation when it comes to differing political positions is actually taking a step back. It's working in the direction of trying to not react, but it's in order to do that. Like, I really acknowledge that I'm going to react, right? I'm going to have an emotional reaction. But what I found myself being able to do is actually to shift how I view it in my head. So basically, when somebody says something, those words come out, and they're coming at you, at your mind, like somebody walking up to your house and knocking on the door. And somebody that you don't know, it's just somebody that, like, that doesn't live with you, that doesn't live in your home. They're coming and knocking on your door, asking you, like, hey, can I come in? That's what that statement is. And your check is, when you open the door and you're like, oh, hey, no, you're not coming in. But you acknowledge that it's there. You see that it's there. You can't just say no and not react. Like, you're not. It's very unlikely for you to sit in your house and sit there and listen to it knock. In the analogized portion of this, like when a thought is coming in, because the thought's there, it's boom, it's knocking. Now, what I actually did to kind of follow this analogy through to real life is that I remember being a young adult and having Jehovah's Witnesses come up to my door, and I would go out and I would, instead of letting them into the house, or I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't let them in, but I also wouldn't just cast them away immediately. I would step outside of my house, outside of the door, and I would close the door behind me, and I'd sit down and I'd say, I would love to have a conversation with you guys, if you have some time. And they're every time they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I'd sit down, and at first, the very first time I ever did, I was very antagonistic. I was still very hateful in my youth towards religion. I had a lot of really silly thoughts about it that didn't serve me or anybody else. So eventually what I found myself doing, which was way more beneficial for them and for me and just for our emotional well-being, and was asking questions. And just and the initial intent wasn't pure. It was, I wanted to trip them up. I wanted to set them up into a position where they were like, they stumbled over themselves. And there would be times when they would do that, and there would be times when I would do it. And when they would do it, it's typically, then it leans back to, oh, we just gotta have faith. And I'm like, okay, well, I gotcha. In my head, that's what I'm thinking. And initially, that's how I would actually respond too. And then eventually, it would get more. I'd get better. I'd refine and hone these skills of asking questions. And so, as I refined this skill of asking the questions, I would feel like the stress reduced. And the thing is, like, it was almost like I was putting on a different hat. Like, I would be putting on an investigative journalist hat. I'd be putting on a scientist hat, where I'm exploring new worlds. I'm an adventurer, and so I'm going to explore the world of your ideas, and I'm going to choose to do so from a place of as genuine as I can be. And the more genuine that I got, the better the conversation was, the more interesting, the more introspective the other person got, because I wasn't trying to insert my ideas. It wasn't trying to build it into a situation where they would fumble and fall over. It was genuinely wanting to know about them as a person, and what it is they're talking about, how they feel about it, and why they feel so strongly, and what kind of impacts that they've seen, and what do they think the impacts are. And doing that, it really helps that person. Like, it's almost like you're working with that person to help them explore their own thoughts about something, because a lot of times we're just taking in ideas, and we're reading articles, and we're hearing these people say these things, and we're kind of just creating this amalgamation of all these different pieces of information in our minds all at once, and we're never really sitting down and like synthesizing it, or reviewing it, analyzing it ourselves, and what we think to be true. Like, it's just, this is what people say that I trust, and so I say that too, and it feels right because it makes sense. That's fine. There's not a lot of time to dive into that when you're busy trying to make money to pay for your mortgage and your cars and your kids' school and all that stuff. And so it's no hate there at all. But it's just an opportunity at dinner tonight, or at Christmas, or the next time that your family gets together, next time you find yourself in a potentially emotionally distraught situation, you have the option of putting on that hat, of walking out your front door and closing it behind you, where you're leaving your ego, you're leaving your vested interests behind, and you're stepping out into a place that is genuinely interested in knowing about this person and about the idea. Because we're not, if you don't want to attack a person, and as a matter of fact, if you're having this conversation and the person walks themselves into a trap, just and whether you set it up or not, through your questioning, if you're laying traps, which I recommend that you don't do. Just honestly ask questions and just want to learn more about them. It'll make you feel better. And honestly, when you think, what people often, I feel like a driving motivation behind these arguments is actually, like, you want to make sure that the people around are not receiving this information from this person. Like you feel like it's dangerous for people to have these ideas, and so you have to counter them. You fighting back and forth doesn't really help create a good impression of the bystander with you, right? You're an antagonist. You're fighting them. And they're fighting you, and neither of you really look that good. And you're waiting for that moment where you can just cut them and like get them in that I gotcha moment. And like, yeah, okay, like you got them, but you're a jerk. Like you didn't treat people well. The way that people will look at you and I can say this for sure because it's happened to me over and over again. Whenever I have effectively used this with other people in a public domain, it is, the impacts are tremendous. And the way that people have come up to me afterwards, they're like, wow, that was like really interesting conversation that you were having with that guy. And like, he seemed like he was like really impassioned, and like anytime he was kind of getting really crazy, like you guys just kind of took the conversation another way. Like, these literally, I've had these like breakdown analyses of the conversations I've had with other people that were there, and they were just like, I'm like really impressed that it didn't get crazy radical, or like really highly emotional. And it's just like I respected the way that you approached the conversation, like whether or not they agreed with what the other guy was saying or not. It was really, really cool to have that kind of feedback from the bystanders, because that's really what matters. It's not about that person. It's not about really any of the people, but I bring that up because it seems to be a motivational factor in us when we're trying to combat these ideas. Is we want to perform for people, and we want to show them that we're great and they should respect us and our opinions versus theirs. And that's just not the best way to actually elicit that feeling, that emotion towards yourself from others. Actually, honest questioning is probably the best version of doing that, the best means of doing it. And the one step up from there is actually, if like I was saying, if somebody finds themselves in a trap, like falling down, like where they get mentally tripped up over their own ideas because of the questions that you're asking, if you help them, that's significant. That's a huge deal. Like, you help them out of the hole. You're not there kicking dirt on them while they're down. You're like, oh, well, maybe, like, did you think about maybe this, or whatever the case may be, wherever they tripped up, but like go down there with them and help them get back up, because that can be even more powerful. Like, wow, you didn't even, like, I didn't. Where do you stand? Like, if people come up to you afterwards, like, I don't know, where do you actually stand in politics? I'm like, that's great. That's like a perfect place to be. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a lifelong student, and I was just really curious about the way that they thought. And when we got to those points, I was wondering if they had ever considered these things, or what they felt about it. And you just try to provide that path out of the hole. And that creates even more respect for you, and a greater relationship between you and that person as well, while it kind of combating those ideas by people seeing like, oh yeah, there's kind of some gaps in logic here and there. It's a great way to manage those situations when you're able to kind of put on what I call like your 10-year-old hat, where you're just genuinely questioning things about the world and how it works. If you genuinely want to know what this person thinks and why they think it, rather than combating it, you will actually do a better job of combating it that way. You will be more effective in the sense that you're not going to win the argument. You're going to win converts. You're going to have more people look to you as a leader than you do if you're cutting people down at the knees. And that's just the truth. But that's it. I need to skedaddle because we got dinner to prep, and they've been rocking without me, and it's I'm so grateful for them. I'm so grateful for my wife. She's amazing. She's incredible. Thank you, babe, and thank all of you. I appreciate you guys. I hope that you're having a great Thanksgiving and you get to celebrate it exactly how you want to, without worrying about the judgments from other people. You just choose what's right for you and your family, and go with it. And don't second guess yourself. Just follow your heart, be smart, be safe. I'll see you guys here again next week.